So there I was at this snore fest of a work conference, pretending to care about synergy and productivity or whatever. Then, bam! In walks Daniel, Mr. Tall, dark, and handsome, from the rival company. My heart skipped a beat, the kind of beat that screams trouble, but you ignore it anyway. We locked eyes, and just like that, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Fast forward a few sneaky text messages later, and we're meeting up in secret. It felt like I was in some sort of spy movie, minus the cool gadgets and explosions. Each secret rendezvous was a rush, the kind that makes your heart race and your palms sweat. Yeah, that kind. Things escalated pretty quickly. One minute we were exchanging flirty texts. The next, we were off on a romantic getaway. Just me and Daniel in a cozy little cabin, far away from the real world. It was like we were in our own little bubble, away from responsibilities, away from Mark. But then the guilt started creeping in. It hit me like a ton of bricks. I love Mark. I really do. He's been my rock for over a decade. So I tried to cut ties with Daniel. I told him we couldn't see each other anymore. But who was I kidding? The more I tried to stay away, the more I was drawn back to him. It was like trying to stop a train, just impossible. Then one day, I got this note. No name, no nothing, just a piece of paper that read, "I know about you and Daniel." Chills ran down my spine. Who knew? Was it Mark? Someone at work? My mind was racing with all the possibilities. Paranoia said that every glance, every whisper around me felt like they were talking about my affair. I was in too deep, caught up in a whirlwind of lies and secrets. The affair was like a fire I couldn't put out, no matter how hard I tried. And that note was just the beginning of a storm I didn't see coming. You ever get that feeling like something's off, but you can't quite put your finger on it? That was me after finding out that the warning note about my affair with Daniel was from his ex talk about a plot twist. Right? It's like walking into a spider web and trying to figure out if the spider's on you. So I confronted Daniel. My heart was racing, hands shaking. I expected some big showdown, but guess what? He was smooth as silk, denying everything. He had this way of looking at you that made you believe even the most outrageous lies. And like a fool, I bought it, hook, line, and sinker. Meanwhile, back at home, Mark was starting to put the pieces together. He's not a detective, but you don't need to be one to notice when your wife's mind is a million miles away. He was asking questions and I was dodging them like a pro. But lies, man, they're like building a house of cards. One wrong move and the whole thing comes crashing down. The day Mark found a hotel receipt in my coat pocket, I knew the jig was up. He confronted me, his face all red, voice shaking. I tried to lie my way out of it, but you could see the hurt in his eyes. We had this massive argument, the kind that makes the neighbors wonder if they should call the cops. It was ugly, real ugly. I felt trapped like a cornered animal. That's when I made the decision that changed everything. I left Mark, just packed my bags and left. No goodbye, no explanation, nothing. I moved in with Daniel, thinking I'd finally found my freedom and happiness. What a joke that was. It was like jumping out of the frying pan and into the fire. Living with Daniel was like being on a roller coaster that only goes down. Sure, there were moments of joy, but they were fleeting, like chasing smoke with your bare hands. I thought I was living the dream, but in reality, I was just lost in a fantasy. It's funny, you know how you can convince yourself that you're happy when you're really just running away from the truth. And that's how I ended up where I did, in Daniel's arms but further away from happiness than ever. It's like standing in the middle of a crowded room but feeling completely alone. You think you know what you're doing, but really you're just lost trying to find a way out. You know that feeling when you think you've hit the jackpot, but it turns out to be fool's gold? Yeah, that was me with Daniel. It started with small things, him being snappy, as bickering over nonsense, but soon those small cracks turned into canyons. We were arguing about everything from how I made coffee to why I was too quiet. I felt like I was walking on eggshells in my own house. So I thought, hey, maybe I need my old friends. A bit of the old Emily back. But reaching out to them was like calling up ghosts. They had moved on. And honestly, can you blame them? I had ditched everyone for Daniel, and now I was just a name from the past. It stung, realizing I was alone in the mess I made. Then the bombshell dropped. I found out Daniel was seeing someone else. Classic, right? There I was, thinking we had something special, and he was out there playing the field. Confronting him was ugly. There was shouting, crying, the whole 9 yards. It was the end of the road for us, and honestly, it was a relief in a twisted sort of way. Heartbroken and lost. I figured maybe Mark would take me back. I know, wishful thinking, right? But desperation makes you do crazy things. When I found out he was seeing someone else, it was like a punch to the gut. He had moved on, found happiness without me. I wanted to be angry, to scream and shout, but who was I kidding? I had thrown away everything we had for a fantasy. So there I was, standing in the wreckage of my life, wondering how it all went so wrong. The dream I chased with Daniel turned into a nightmare, and the life I had with Mark was just a memory. It's funny in a sad way how you don't know what you've got till it's gone. And there I was, left with nothing but regrets and a bunch of what-ifs. Ever tried catching up a hole in your life with all the wrong things? Well, let me tell you, it's like using tape to fix a leaking dam. After everything went south with Daniel and Mark was out of the picture, I started dating. Not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't stand the silence of my own company. It was a parade of Mr. Wrongs, each one a stark reminder of what I'd lost. Then work started slipping through my fingers. I couldn't focus. I kept making mistakes. It's like my brain was constantly somewhere else. My boss had that final talk with me, it's not working out kind. And just like that, I was out of a job, out of a routine, out in the cold. Things went downhill fast. Bills piled up like snowdrifts. I was selling off my stuff just to keep the lights on. First, it was the little things. Some clothes, a few books. Then it got bigger, the TV, my laptop. Each item sold felt like a piece of me leaving. I was dismantling my life, bit by bit, just to stay afloat in the middle of the storm. In the middle of the storm, I got a call. Mom was seriously ill. I should have jumped on the first bus to see her, but I couldn't. The thought of sitting by her bedside, pretending to be the daughter she thought she raised, was too much. So I stayed away, drowning in guilt. Each day I didn't visit, the weight of it grew heavier. I was lost, stumbling through life without a map, selling my belongings to survive, avoiding my sick mother, and dating guys I didn't care about. Looking back, I was like a ghost haunting my own life, unable to connect with anything real. It's one thing to lose your way, but it's another to lose yourself. And boy, had I lost myself. Life has a twisted sense of humor, doesn't it? Just when you think you've hit rock bottom, it hands you a shovel to dig deeper. That's what happened when I lost my mom. I didn't even get to say goodbye. The guilt was like a constant throbbing pain. Then, out of the blue, I found out Mom left me a bit of money. It wasn't life-changing, but it was something. You'd think I'd use it wisely, right? Maybe pay off some debts, save for a rainy day. Nope, not me. I went on a spending spree, fancy clothes, nights out, you name it. It was like I was trying to buy my way out of sadness. Spoiler alert, it didn't work. One of those wild nights led to a pregnancy scare. Talk about a wake-up call. I was already struggling to take care of myself, let alone a baby. Turned out to be a false alarm, but it shook me. I started to wonder what the heck I was doing with my life. Then, out of nowhere, I ran into an old friend from college. She looked great, successful, happy, the whole package. We got to talking, and I spilled my guts about everything. Instead of running for the hills, she offered me a job. It wasn't anything fancy, just a gig at her company. But it was a lifeline. That job offer felt like a small light at the end of a very long, very dark tunnel. For the first time in what felt like forever, I had something to look forward to, a chance to start over, maybe even make things right. I was down but not out. Not yet. You ever get that feeling like the universe is playing some cruel joke on you? Well, strap in because it gets better. Remember that job my friend offered me? Turned out to be a big fat scam. I showed up all hopeful and stuff, only to find out the company didn't even exist. Talk about a slap in the face. Things spiraled from there. I was behind on rent, and my landlord had about as much patience as a toddler. One morning, I found my stuff on the sidewalk, the door lock change, homeless me. If you told me a few years ago that I'd end up here, I'd have laughed in your face. So, I did what any sane person would do. Note the sarcasm, I turned to the bottle. It was like my personal escape hatch, but you know what? Booze is a liar. Promises to make things better, then kicks you when you're down. And boy, did it kick hard. In a moment of sheer desperation, I called Mark. I thought maybe, just maybe, he'd want to hear me out. The guy who once promised to love me till death do us part. But guess what? He hung up, just clicked into silence. Can't say I blame him, but man, that hurt. With nowhere to turn, I took a job, the kind that makes you swallow your pride and then some. It was this dingy little dive bar. The pay was peanuts, and the customers? Let's just say they weren't there for the ambience. Every night, I'd come home smelling like stale beer and broken dreams. So there I was, serving drinks to strangers, trying not to think about how I used to be on the other side of that bar. Life's funny like that, isn't it? One day you're up, the next you're scraping the bottom of the barrel, wondering how the heck you got there. You ever meet someone and think, hey, maybe my luck's turning around? That was me with this guy at the bar where I worked. He was charming, seemed to get my situation, and before I knew it, we were hanging out after shifts. But guess what? Mr. Charming had a plan, and it wasn't about playing knight in shining armor. I lent him money, not once, not twice, but enough times to start feeling the pinch. It was always some sob story. His car broke down, his rent was overdue, and me being the eternal optimist, kept falling for it. Until one day, I overheard him bragging about duping the sad barmaid. That's me, in case you're wondering. Felt like a punch in the gut. So I confronted him right there in front of everyone. It wasn't my finest hour. There was shouting, a few choice words, and his smug face just asking to be wiped off the planet. I made a scene, but hey, at least I stood up for myself, right? In the midst of this chaos, my health took a nosedive. Stress, bad eating, worse sleeping, I was burning the candle at both ends, and it was catching up with me. My body was like, nope, we're done here. I started feeling tired all the time, sick, just run down. It's like my body was echoing my life. A bit of a wreck. Speaking of wrecks, I managed to get into a car accident. Nothing serious, but the car was toast. That was my ride to work, to the grocery store, to anywhere that wasn't my tiny apartment. Losing it felt like losing a bit of freedom, not that I had much of that going around. In a moment of sheer desperation, I called D. Don't ask me why. Maybe I thought he'd care or something. But when he answered, it was like talking to a stranger, cold, distant, and in a hurry to get off the phone. It was a short call, but it told me everything I needed to know. I was alone in this. Then, out of the blue, a former colleague from my old job called. She'd heard about my situation and wanted to help. But me, I was too proud, too stubborn to accept it. I told her I was fine, managing, thank you very much. But the truth was, I was drowning and too foolish to grab a lifeline thrown my way. It's funny how pride can do that to you, turn help into an enemy, make you believe you're better off alone. But let me tell you, alone isn't all it's cracked up to be. You know how they say when it rains, it pours? Well, my life was like a never-ending thunderstorm. First, this legal notice lands in my mailbox, all official and scary, saying I owed a ton of money. Debts I'd been ignoring, hoping they'd magically disappear. Here's a spoiler alert. They didn't. So what did I do? I did what any rational person would do in a crisis. I hit the casino. Yeah, I know, not my brightest moment. I had this wild idea that I could gamble my way out of debt. Like I'd just walk in, win big, and everything would be fine. Instead, I lost not just a little, but a lot. It was like watching my life savings go down the drain, and all I could do was stand there and pull the lever again. With my debts now bigger than ever, my landlord started getting antsy. He was all, pay up or get out. I couldn't blame him, but where was I supposed to go? I was already living paycheck to paycheck, and now this. In a fit of desperation, I started selling stuff, not just any stuff, but my mom's heirlooms, the things she treasured and left to me. Every item I sold felt like I was losing a part of her all over again. But what choice did I have? It was either that or live on the streets. So, there I was, selling off my past piece by piece just to keep a roof over my head. It was like I was erasing my history, saying goodbye to the last bits of life that once felt so secure, so permanent. It's funny in a sad way how quickly things can change. One day you're on top of the world. The next you're scraping by, selling your memories to the highest bidder. So there I was at the dive bar where I worked, just trying to make it through another night. Then this guy starts causing trouble, a real loudmouth. You know, he's hassling the other customers, and I'm thinking, not on my watch. So I step in, and before you know it, things get heated. We're shouting, shoving, and then bam, turns into a full-blown brawl. It was like something out of a bad movie. Cops show up, and guess who gets handcuffed? Yep, yours truly. I'm sitting in the back of a police car, thinking, how did it come to this? They threw me in a cell for the night, and let me tell you, that's a wake-up call. It's cold, it's hard, and it's loud. I'm sitting there, staring at the ceiling, thinking about every bad choice that led me to this moment. The next morning, I'm released, feeling like I've hit rock bottom. But wait, it gets worse. I get back to my apartment, and the door's wide open. I walk in, and it's like a tornado went through everything I had left, which wasn't much. Gone. Even the thieves must have thought, man, this lady's got nothing. With nowhere else to go, I end up at a homeless shelter. Never in a million years did I think I'd be there, but there I was, lining up for a bed and a meal. And guess who I run into? An old colleague from my first job out of college. She didn't even recognize me at first. We used to talk about our big dreams, and now here we were, worlds apart. It was like looking into a mirror of what could have been. Sleeping in that shelter, surrounded by strangers, I couldn't help but think about everything that had gone wrong. How did I end up here? I used to have a home, a husband, a life. Now I had nothing but the clothes on my back and a whole lot of regret. It's one thing to fall on hard times, but it's another to realize you're the architect of your own downfall. You ever have one of those moments when you overhear something that just stops you in your tracks? That happened to me. Huddled in a corner of a crowded coffee shop, trying to stay warm, I heard a couple of women chatting about Mark, my ex. They were going on about how well he was doing, how happy he looked with his new wife. It was like a punch in the gut, hearing about his picture-perfect life while I was sipping on borrowed time and a free coffee refill. It hit me then, the full weight of what I'd lost, not just Mark, the guy who'd stood by me through thick and thin, but everything. The home we shared, the dreams we built, the trust, the love. I'd thrown it all away for what? A fling that turned my life upside down. It was like a slap in the face, a wake-up call that came too late. I left the coffee shop, my head spinning, and found myself wandering aimlessly. The streets were crowded, but I felt completely alone, like I was a ghost drifting through a world that had moved on without me. I ended up on this park bench, the city buzzing around me. It was getting dark, the kind of darkness that feels heavy, like it's pressing down on you. Sitting there, I couldn't help but think about every choice I'd made, every wrong turn. It's funny how life works. You think you're making these big, bold moves, chasing happiness or freedom or whatever, but sometimes you're just running away from what really matters. So there I was, alone on a park bench, with nothing but my thoughts and a bunch of could-have beens. No fairy tale ending. No knight in shining armor coming to save me. Just me and the mess I made. It's a hard pill to swallow, realizing there's no going back, no way to fix the things you've broken, but it's the truth. And sometimes, the truth is the hardest thing to face.